Today we want to show you the plugin developed by SGSE that integrates the Notifier ID3000 fire panels manufactured by Honeywell in Milestone. In this video, we will show you through the Client Management Configuration tool, how to configure the plugin and the management of the panel itself in Smart Client. We'll start with Client Management. In Client Management, once the plugin is installed, we find a new section within the MIP Plugins folder named after the panel name Notifier. Also, another new section appears where we can see all the fire panels that we have added to the system. To add a new panel, simply by right-clicking, we will see the option to Add New Panel, and the configuration is quite simple. The only thing we will have to enter is the name of the panel, the IP address, the milestone listening port, and the port through which the panel itself transmits. In this case, since the panel does not transmit directly over IP, what we will use is a 2322 IP converter. Once this data has been entered, a symbol with an arrow will appear to download all the configuration. If we select this option, we will download everything that the panel has previously configured. Once the download is done, all the elements that have been downloaded will be listed in the tabs that appear in the plugin, just as we can find it in the subfolders that will appear in the tree of the Notifier panel option. We can list the loops, detectors, push buttons, modules, sirens, zones, and power supplies. Once the download of the configuration is done, we can begin to raise alarms on the rules that can generate different actions on the system. If we go to the Alarm section and create a new alarm, we would simply have to give it a name, and in the Initiator event, we will see that we can select 3 new folders that were not previously there. A folder called ID2Net, which are all the events related to this bus. An option called Notifier Event, which are all the events that will come to us from Notifier, and the last option called Notifier Panel, which are the events related to the panel itself. In this case, if we select, for example, Notifier Events, if we want to register a fire alarm, we would go to Fire Event. We would select the item that generates the event which can be a group, a detector, a button, or the events that can generate this type of event. We select, for example, a group. We click Add OK, and the rest of the configuration is Milestone's own configuration when generating an alarm, such as associating cameras with this alarm. Once we have completed this information, the alarm itself would be created. This configuration can be done in a similar way in the Rules part. In this section, if we simply click Add, a rule will appear. If it is a rule that is generated through an event, in the Notifier section, we'll see the 3 groups of events that we saw previously in the Alarm section. If we generate an event, for example, with a fire source, we could select the item that generates the event and advance to the configuration. In addition, in the Rules section, we are going to introduce a series of reactions on the panel itself. They do not have to be triggered by an event of the panel itself, but by any other technology integrated within the wholesaler. All the reactions that appear with the start of Notifier are all the actions that can be triggered on the panel itself. This would be the configuration part about client management. That requires very little time to be able to configure the integration within Milestone. We continue with the management on the client application in Milestone. What is shown in the video is a representation of a plan with the different elements that can be displayed on them. In this case, we can see the icon of the notifier panel, the detectors, input and output modules, groups, loops and manual buttons. If we go into each of these icons, we can see how different actions can be performed in each of them. If we select the notifier panel and right-click, some events will appear that will be different in each of the icons that will allow us different functions within them, such as, for example, muting the panel's internal buzzer, reset or rearm the system, silent sirens, etc. Different types of actions can be triggered in each of these icons, such as enabling or disabling a zone in the case of groups. In the case of detectors, we can enable or disable the detector or do a test. Likewise, in the Inputs and Outputs module, with these buttons we can do the same actions, enable or disable it and perform a test. Simulating the tests in the case of the elements that are distributed in the installation, we can see how different actions are triggered that will help us identify each of these elements. If we zoom in on the elements we have in this presentation, we can see the two modules, the input and the output, the emergency button and the detector. Also, a siren and converter that we have used to convert from 232 to IP. If we do a test on the detector, we can see that the detector illuminates the LEDs that indicate the alarm, or in this case, the test itself. This way, we can identify which detector we are acting on. If we right-click again, we are going to deactivate and the LED will turn off. We can do a similar thing with the emergency button. We do the activation test and see how its LED lights up. Now we perform the deactivation and see how it turns off. Likewise, we can do it with the input and output modules. We right-click and go to the activation and, in this case, although it looks very faint, we can see how the input module activates or deactivates a small LED that it has at the bottom. If we go to the output module, in this case, we have installed a LED as the module's own output will be activated. We see how this output is activated and the LED that we have connected lights up. Finally, we would like to simulate an alarm signal caused by both the detector and the push button. We have a spray that simulates a fire. In this case, when the detector deems that a fire is occurring, it will activate and launch an alarm in Milestone. In this case, we have associated a camera that is focusing on the panel, and is the camera related to the alarm. If we go to the fire panel and select to silence the internal buzzer, we will make the panel stop the alarm sound. Now let's simulate the emergency button. We see how the alarm generated by the button itself reaches us. The alarm generated by the detector has remained active with the icon in red, and with a circle around it until it has stopped considering being in alarm. That is, it interprets that there is no fire. It is then when it goes to the rest state, to green color. However, the red circle around the icon remains as the operator has not yet confirmed the alarm. On the contrary, the alarm button, given that it is interlocking, will remain permanently active until we reset it directly. Also, if you notice the group icons, they have been activated and have turned red. In this case, we have not configured any alarms in Milestone that are related to these icons, so the red circles do not appear. If we rearm the whole system, we return the emergency button to rest. We can directly rearm the panel so that all its elements are at rest. The icon shows how it goes to sleep, changes to green, and if we right-click, we can select a system reset that will rearm all the groups and all the zones.